we're going to get started. So this is the unlocking the full value of HYCU on Nutanix, the customer series. So this is exclusively for customers. So hopefully you're already very happy customers of HYCU and looking to see what's possible, what's next, and maybe learn something new about a product you've already got in place. So my name is Chris Rogers. I'm the senior product marketing manager here at HYCU. I predominantly look after our hybrid cloud products. So that would be Nutanix, Dell, those types of integrations, so VMware, Azure Local, those types of things. And I'm delighted to be joined by Shiva. Would you like to introduce yourself, Shiva?
Absolutely. Hey, this is Shiva. I work with the product management team at HYCU. Been with the company for close to 7 years now. So really happy to join you, Chris, and talk about our solution with regards to how we offer not just data protection in terms of backup and recovery, but also disaster recovery. So thank you for having me.
Amazing, thank you, Shiva. So yeah, so we got these workshop series. So the cyber resiliency one was done, I think last week, I believe. Today is disaster recovery, and then next week, I think it may be next week. We've got complete protection, so across the entire Nutanix estate, and then mobility. So how do we help you mobilize data across platforms and clouds? So make sure you look out for the invites for those of you who haven't received them already and sign up because they really, really are insightful. Okay. So right, today we're talking about built-in disaster recovery with Haiku. Um, so disaster recovery is one of those topics. I actually spent a lot of my career in disaster recovery and came from a company that specialized in disaster recovery. So kind of like this is my this is my comfort blanket for data protection, which is it's nice to be talking about this within terms of what Haiku can do. So typically what we're going to do, we're going to discuss some of the challenges, right? Me and Shiva are kind of going to have a bit of context around this, and hopefully Shiva will be able to bring some color around what he's seeing in the field, what he's doing when he's talking to customers and prospects and partners and alliances as well. So the first one being is a high TCO. This is typical for most organizations, especially if you're a smaller or mid-market organization. The tools that are out there or some of the strategies that are out there just don't suit the budgets or the capacity that these teams have available to them. They're either completely separate tools or completely separate bolt-ons from their data protection company already, which may come with a massive premium or even a whole new set of cost implications as well. They come with high compute requirements. Typically there's going to be orchestration engines, there's going to be, migration engines and all these types of things that come with it. They cost a lot of money to run. Typically if you're doing disaster recovery to the cloud, they run inside of the cloud, which costs a lot of money on a constant basis. And if you are utilizing a separate tool for disaster recovery, and typically what you're going to find is that you've got two lots of data being stored, one for backup purposes, one for disaster recovery purposes. And whenever you store data, it costs money. Wherever you store it, even if you store it on premises, yes, you paid for that, but every bit of capacity you have to pay for on top, right? So if we can avoid duplication of data, that's only going to help us. So the second challenge is rigid and complicated, right? So fixed destinations. Hey, as a strategy, as an organization, we need to figure out what our DR plan is at time of inception, right? At time of purchasing a product, we need to figure out what our strategy is going to be. And then if we buy a perpetual license, or if we buy maybe potentially even hardware, or we buy a tool that focuses on, to a particular cloud or a particular place, suddenly that leaves us without any flexibility at all. That leaves us without the option to say, actually, our new CTO or a new CISO came in, decided that, Azure isn't the thing for us, and we're going to move workloads to AWS, or we're going to use AWS um, as our strategy moving forward. Yeah, but the tool we bought works really well with Azure and doesn't work that well with AWS, or it doesn't work at all with AWS, or the new Cloud 5 came along and we decided we want to use that one instead, right? So, it's fixed. A lot of the time, the strategy is set when the product's been purchased, and then after that, it's a case of, well, you've made your bed, now lie in it, right? That's the only thing you can do with it. And then rigid runbooks, right? So yes, orchestration and automation is important. We do all the automation, all the orchestration at Haiku as well, but it's all flexible. It's not built into a very rigid plan where you say, okay, I have to fail over every single one of my VMs to this place, or every single one of these VMs have to go here. Typically when we're talking about disaster recovery, typically we're going to be talking about big events. What we've had in the past would be, hurricanes, tornadoes, natural disasters, data center power cuts, fires, floods, those types of things. But actually, realistically, now we might be looking at things like large scale cyber attacks. But it might not just be a cyber attack on one VM, 10 VMs, it could be hundreds of VMs. But we need to make sure we have a flexible run book that allows us to recover what we want, where we want, when we want. And it might not all be from the same point in time. So we might have to go back a week for some VMs, a day for other VMs, right? Maybe even like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it might be. With HYCU, you have that flexibility as well. And then it comes a complex to install and manage. If you're using a completely separate tool, you maybe have to have a completely separate team to just run DR operations. Or if you are using your data protection team, which combines backup and DR, then suddenly you're going to be in a position where they've got to learn two tools, become experts in two things. And then it's a case of which tool do we use for what? What constitutes disaster versus backup and recovery? When do we use tool A versus tool B? And all of that critical thinking time, all of that time that it takes to make that decision is time that we're losing on our RTO, let alone what the software RTO can achieve. But all that critical thinking time is time we're adding on to our recovery. So we need to make sure it's clear and easy for people to understand what to do and when. And the last one then is drains resource. That kind of pulls onto my last point a little bit. They're costly to set up. They take a long time to set up. They need dedicated maintenance, dedicated teams to potentially even run. They might have to run out of hour testing, because it might impact production workloads. If we're having to shut down data center A to test in the cloud, or we're using storage replication, it might impact the way the storage controllers work, etc. It might be that type of thing where we have to take a weekend or an evening to do testing. It seems a bit, you know, old school, right? To have to take weekends away for things. We're always on businesses now. We don't have downtime. There's not weekends available anymore, especially for most organizations where they are always on. And as I said, if we had that dedicated DR team, suddenly it becomes that disconnect between, okay, well, what triggers the DR team to do their thing versus what triggers the backup team to do their thing? How do they talk to each other? How do they maintain communication? How do they make sure they're not tripping over each other or duplicating workflows or duplicating protection? Because every time we duplicate something, whether that is duplicating protection, duplicating data storage, duplicating man hours, all those things cost money. And if we can reduce any duplication of those things, we're going to save money and have a lower TCO at the end of it. So now we kind of understand some of the challenges. Oh, sorry, Shiva, I forgot to bring you in on this one. What do you think is a real life challenge? What's the biggest challenge you've seen out there? And when we've been talking disaster recovery to customers, would you say, in your opinion?
Sure. I mean, you pretty much talked about all the points that I encounter with the customers. But one of the things that I wanted to share is sometimes customers always have this clear demarcation between the RPO and the RTO, right? Uh,
Mm.
Most of the times, customers focus on an extremely aggressive RPO
Mm.
for highly critical workloads, and that's exactly where high-end replication solutions come into picture. But for most of the part, or for the most of the times, uh, customers are looking for a near instantaneous RTO because when it comes to these two things that I just talked about, RPO basically deals with, you know, how much data that you can afford to lose before you bring your destination up and running. But RTO is basically uh, talks about your service readiness. Like how long does it take for you to bring your service back up and running, regardless of your data loss? So those are two different things. And some of the customers do have a clear understanding of how that needs to be demarked and how that needs to be separated and classify the workloads. For the rest, they don't, and it basically takes a little bit of a journey for them to understand how they can split these workloads with the, that are critical versus non-critical, and focus on, is it just about focusing both on RPO and RTO, or is it just on RTO? So that is another huge challenge that I've noticed, especially when we talk about DR.
Yeah, 100%. I 100% agree with that. And it's getting that balance. It's like a three-way balance, right, between kind of compliance, cost, and those
The
and that risk
SLAs.
and risk. Yeah, you've got kind of
Yeah.
that three-way. So you've got to, if you have all the budget in the world, then you can have everything spin up super quick with super low RPOs, right? But it's going to cost you millions of dollars, right,
Mhm.
every single year. You can reduce that cost, but then you may have to reduce, maybe accept the RPO and RTO maybe slightly higher.
Hmm.
And he said not every workload is created equally, right? So if you want a
Yep.
tier one VM, then yeah, maybe you need that super quick RPO RTO. But as you said, for 99% of the VMs or 90% of the VMs in customers' estate, they need to understand what is going to be an effective RPO and RTO,
Exactly.
and balance out with their costs, right? Because every time you take money out of or every time you spend money on disaster recovery or backup, you take it out of production systems as well, right? It's not an endless pot of money. So we have to
Hmm.
balance that risk and cost ladder, 100%. So let's now discuss the haiku way, the interesting way, right? So the three core pillars for us, simple and effective. Hopefully, if you've been using haiku for a long time, hopefully everyone here is a long time haiku user. If not, if you've only been using it weeks, months, days, hours, hopefully you found that it's really incredibly simple and incredibly effective. And that's the whole idea of the haiku way, is that we try and take all that complexity away from teams. So they have critical thinking, so it's really easy to understand, really easy to use. They don't have to go on 3 or 5 day courses to understand what to do, how to use it, right? It's there, it's ready, it's in front of it, it's intuitive. So from a haiku point of view, if you're protecting Nutanix today, let's say you're protecting AHV, whatever it may be, on Nutanix, which a vast majority of our customers are doing already. If you connect your cloud account into Haiku, essentially you've set up DR already. That's how easy setup is for Haiku. It's very, very, very easy to do. And what I mean by the second point on this slide was, hold toils ball down a single drop down box. This came out of a previous webinar I did last week. It was a tech bootcamp. So one of my colleagues was showing how to do a DR to the cloud, right? And it kind of sprung on me that actually there's whole organizations, whole companies, whole software development teams built just to move virtual machines and data and workloads from on-premise into the clouds, right? You can go out and you can purchase them today, and that's their one use case is, we can move your VM from site A to site B for disaster recovery or migration purposes, right? Well, actually, we've managed to boil that whole software stack and that whole company, everything down into a single drop-down box inside of a UI. And that's how simple we can make things. Is where do you want to recover to? I want to recover back in place, so back to my Nutanix cluster. Chris just accidentally hit delete on the keyboard and he's removed it. Okay, we put it back to where it was. Actually, where do you want to recover it to? Oh, the cloud, because this one's no longer working. And that's how simple it is to make it. And I can't make it any simpler than that. I can't explain it any simpler than that. It's just a drop down box as an option. So I think that's really, props to our engineering team and our UI design team to make all of that complexity boil down to a single drop down. And the second piece of it being cost effective. So we don't require any additional components. So if you're running Haiku in Nutanix today, you've got all the things you need already in place to run disaster recovery with Haiku. Whether that's disaster recovery to another Nutanix cluster, we're going to go through some of the options in a second about where you can do disaster recovery too. But essentially, you have all the components ready. You don't need to install 5, 6, 7, 20 more things to be able to do DR. It's all there ready to go. And if you are running disaster recovery into the cloud, so that would be AWS, GCP, or Azure, we don't run any compute nodes in the cloud on a permanent basis. So that means you're saving all of that money, all of that burn down on any commits you may have, or any, on that credit card that you accidentally signed up to AWS with. We're not running up expensive compute costs, which are running 24/7 in the cloud, right? We don't need to do that, which is amazing. And then the flexibility, freedom of choice, but also whilst maintaining control. This is a key point. Plenty of vendors will be able to fail you over into their cloud or pull their data into their cloud, but suddenly you're under their jurisdiction now. Your data lives in their tenancy. Whereas actually, freedom of choice with control is exactly what it says on the tin. You maintain control and sovereignty of your data, so you choose where it goes, how it goes, and when it goes. And that's completely the haiku way. So throughout all the webinars and all the marketing materials, all the solutions briefs and all the talks for our sales engineers and everything else that you've spoken to, customer success and support is control is at the essence of what we do. We don't ever sell storage. We're not a storage company. We don't have our own cloud. We don't have our own compute that you can run on us and we can charge you a premium for. That's not our way. We provide the software and the ability for you guys to do whatever you want to do with the freedom and flexibility of choice that you deserve. And coming onto that, then we have direct integration with all the major players for disaster recovery. So that would be Azure, AWS, GCP, but also you can do cross hypervisor recovery as well. So VMware, Nutanix, Azure Local, etc. That's kind of explained on this slide. So the multi-cloud protection with Haiku. So you can see on the left-hand side, well, so we're talking about Nutanix today. You can see all of the arrays of, sorry, Shiva, I've done it again. I completely, is there anything you wanted to add on this previous slide, Shiva?
Sure. The one last thing I wanted to add about this is, especially when it comes to offering flexibility of restoring VMs onto a different platform,
Hmm.
you need to keep in mind that it's not an easy task, right?
Hmm.
Because uh, there are so many things that you have to be aware of, especially when you're, let's say, moving VMs from Nutanix to, let's say, an Azure ACI stack. You need to understand the VM configuration, the VPC configuration, the API calls, and the IAM permissions. And these things tend to change. These things tend to be revised. And you need to have a dedicated team that has the ability to constantly keep track of all of these changes. And you need
Yeah.
an amazing support team because at the end of the day, it's not just about the product being flexible, it's also about the engineers who design this product are always ready, keep their eyes and ears to the ground, and constantly keep track of these changes and cater to our customers. And that's exactly where HYCU comes into picture because it's this whole supportability aspect where we really shine, especially when it comes to serving to these DR needs for our customers' organizations.
Yeah, that's an amazing point, Shiva. Yeah, and as you all know, if you're all customers on the call, you have your dedicated customer success engineers. You have a dedicated support line, so you know how good that we are at giving customers what they want, and we listen and we put those features directly back into the product. So absolutely, that's exactly right, Shiva. Making sure that we build the product for our customers and not for what we think the market's doing, but actually what the market is changing to. When we've seen that building out into a product.
Absolutely.
So multi-cloud, or hybrid cloud, hybrid multi-cloud protection with Haiku. God, I put my teeth in right today. So you can see on the left-hand side we have all of the different components or data sets that we support with Nutanix. And this isn't all of them. We do support even more than this, which couldn't fit them on the slide because there's so many. So if you are only protecting, one of these, have a look in your organization if you are using things like volume groups or Nutanix files, Nutanix objects, because we can expand the protection onto those objects and those data sets as well. And then you can see here, we can go into then cloud object storage. So that's a data domain, virtual edition in the cloud, Microsoft Azure Blob Storage, AWS S3, Google Cloud Compute Storage, whatever it may be, right? But also we have a nice NC2 box in here in the cloud as well. So actually, Shiva, do you want to run us through our NC2 integration and kind of what we do from a Nutanix NC2 point of view? Because I know it's quite a unique integration. It's quite a special integration we have.
Absolutely. So NC2 is, to put it simply, it's the ability to run Nutanix on your public cloud hyperscaler. I know that Nutanix today supports AWS and Azure. They're pretty much on their way to support Google Cloud. Um, Now, where Haiku really plays a huge role is the ability to to readily support any of these deployments on not just on-prem but also on the public cloud infrastructure. Case in point, we were the first ever data protection vendor that offered a qualified purpose-built backup and recovery support for NC2 running on AWS. Um, this happened, I believe, back in 2019. I mean, time flies, but um, I know, right? So Nutanix basically qualified, or Haiku and Nutanix, we together qualified this deployment on public cloud. And this is because of two simple reasons. Number one, as Chris pointed out, our integration with Nutanix is unlimited, right? We pretty much support every component of Nutanix offered within the AOS subsystem. But in addition to that is our integration with our public cloud hyperscalers. Because we not only have the ability to deploy ourselves within your hyperscaler in a SaaS or in a on-demand installation kind of way, but we also have the ability to do backups directly to any of the object storage with no staging target. And again, we were the first ever vendor to offer direct backups to object storage. So by supporting backups directly to AWS or to Azure or even to Google, we will be able to support NC2 deployments on any public cloud hyperscaler, so to speak of. So if Nutanix basically becomes ready on Google Cloud, we will be ready. As a matter of fact, we also support NC2 deployments on AWS and on Azure readily out of the box, and we will be ready for Google Cloud as well. So any of your backups that are done on on-prem can be seamlessly moved to the cloud, and they could be even natively restored to the cloud if required. And that basically offers unlimited flexibility with HYCU installed on NC2.
Yeah, amazing, Shivan. One of the things, so I'm not saying I'm new to HYCU. I feel like I've been here forever. I'm part of the furniture now. But I joined in October last year. And when I was starting to learn the product and really get my hands on it, I was like, oh, I'm going to try the HYCU for NC2. And I was like, so I actually emailed one of our tech guys and say, hey, like, can you give me access? And he's like, yeah, you've got access. And I was like, oh, okay. So I logged in. I was like, oh, it's the same. It's the same
Exactly.
as what you have on HYCU on
Yeah.
premises, right? That's why I was getting confused because we didn't need to build another product, right?
Hmm.
Because of the way we integrate, because we use all the native APIs and we talk directly with Nutanix engineering and our engineering talk, we built a product that when they bought this new thing out, it essentially just worked, right? We didn't have to re-architect and rebuild anything or add bolt-ons or different, proxies or gateways or anything else to talk, right? We
I
natively
mean, it was
worked
like
with
a
the platform.
match made in heaven, right? To your point, Chris, because
Exactly.
by the time NC2 was introduced by Nutanix, we were already like ready with our support for Nutanix within the AOS, and we were also doing pretty well with integration on all the three major hyperscalers. So when NC2 came out, we were readily available to support NC2 on any of the public cloud hyperscalers. So
Yeah,
couldn't have
amazing.
asked for more.
Exactly that. So yeah, if you are interested in RNC2, there's some white papers and solution briefs available on haiku.com. I actually did a webinar a few months back, maybe even a bit longer. I remember I was at Nutanix.next in London doing a webinar from there. So it was whenever that was on NC2 and our integration. So if you are interested in more details, find that one on our website in the resource center as well. And I want to sort of talk about cross hypervisor and cloud disaster recovery, and kind of like all the components, all the things you might want to do when you have a setup like this, right? So I'm going to keep clicking the arrows, and you can see all the different ways you can suddenly start utilizing data and utilizing these things. And these actually come from born out of real customer requirements. So real customers ask us to say, hey, have you got a solution that can go from VMware to Nutanix, but also from Nutanix to Azure Local, and also from Nutanix to AWS, but also from AWS to Azure to Google Cloud to NC2, all these things that you can see on the screen, plus loads more. Customers want this flexibility because your customer might have this multi-cloud or hybrid cloud strategy where it's Nutanix plus AWS. But then customer A is going to have Nutanix plus Azure. And then customer B is going to have Nutanix, VMware, and GCP, right? You can see how we need this like kind of pick a mix or patchwork approach where we go, okay, pick which ones you're using and they can all interlink and all interweave, right? We haven't got dedicated it's only Nutanix and VMware. It's only Nutanix and AWS, right? We can essentially pick and choose as from a menu, if you will, an a la carte menu, pick which ones you want to use, and then you have mobility and freedom between there. And the way I like to describe it is application-centric disaster recovery. So disaster recovery to the cloud. So, hey, we're taking our Nutanix or our VMware or Azure local VMs. Instead of running a secondary data center, we're going to utilize AWS, Azure, or GCP. And we're going to spin those VMs up in those native formats. So inside of AWS, EC2, for instance, we're going to spin that VM up in an EC2 instance inside of AWS in a different region. That's, that disaster recovery to the cloud. And then you've got cross-hypervisor disaster recovery. So I've got a Nutanix deployment and I've got a VMware deployment. I'm going to have them replicate between each other, and I've got a site A and a site B, and I'm going to replicate them. It doesn't have to be cross hypervisor. It could be Nutanix at site A and site B, but we do have the ability to go cross hypervisor if required as well. The easy one is Nutanix to Nutanix, right? It's very, very simple to do. But the hard stuff is when we go cross hypervisor. And then we have cross-regional disaster recovery in the cloud. So if you have instances or data sat inside of GCP, AWS, Azure, you name it, hey, we can do that. We can then replicate that data and spin it up inside of another region in that cloud, but also we can even do cross-cloud. So if you've got VMs in AWS, we can spin those up in Azure. We can spin those up in GCP as well. So that really does enable this multi-cloud strategy for there. DR for modern cloud services. So, cross-regional replication for things like platform as a service or database as a service. Really important that that type of data is also protected. It's becoming a very big linchpin in a lot of organizations' application stack. That database and platform as a service and those types of things are included. They're part of the build, they're part of production. So they need to be treated like a first class thing, not just relying on, oh, GCP doesn't go down that often, so we'll be okay. that hope is not a strategy when it comes to disaster recovery. So we need to make sure we build for those things. And then the interesting one is disaster recovery for SaaS applications. So we actually have recently introduced export, so offline export for SaaS data. So typically when we're talking about SaaS, right, you need the data and the application. If the application is down, you don't have access to the data either, right? Like, if you take the biggest one, Office 365, for instance, if I can't log into SharePoint or OneDrive, I can't get to the data. But actually with HYCU, we have offline export. So you can log into HYCU and then you can download or view or even see data. So I can see that SharePoint file, I can see that OneDrive file, I can get that one thing back that I need to work on whilst 365 is back up running. I can download and give access from a SHA file share to some legal documents that I need my team to be able to look at, right? For an iManage, for instance. And the last one on the list here was cloud repatriation. So if you do manage to find yourself in a disaster, hopefully no one does, but if you do, and you have to migrate up into AWS or Azure and run there for a period of time, not only can we protect you in those clouds, so once you're running there, yeah, we can make sure you're backed up and make sure everything is good and you're seamless. But then when you're ready to come back down again, we can help you with that as well. We can bring your workloads back down. And then also we know that they came from somewhere else. And we say, do you want to put that back as it was when it came from Nutanix? Yes, please. No worries. We'll make sure the capacity, the storage sizes, the disk layouts, all that type of stuff is the same as what it was. The networking was the same as what it was when it came from Nutanix. So we know where it came from, and we want to put it back to as it was. And then our unique differentiators here. So no agents, no proxies, no permanent cloud compute. So even though we are spinning up in Azure, AWS, GCP, we don't have anything permanently running constantly, converting data, etc. And we have no duplication of data. If you want to store your backups in AWS and then use that same set of data to spin up into the cloud, you can absolutely do that. You don't have to utilize two separate copies of the data if you don't want. You can have two copies, right? You can have a copy sat on Nutanix objects, you can have a copy sat up in the cloud, and you can utilize the cloud copy to do disaster recovery with as well. So Shiva, what stands out to you on this page? What's the thing that you want to really bring some extra flavor to, of color to on this page? Because I'm sure I'm boring people with my stuff. So you're bringing the real color to this webinar. So what's the thing
No,
that I've
no,
missed? What's the
not at
thing that
all.
what's the thing that you want to say on this slide that maybe I haven't covered or you want to just clarify?
I think the one last thing I wanted to add here is I hope everybody realizes that the kind of use case that we deliver for data protection is not just about recovering your data from data loss or data corruption or ransomware attacks, but it has gotten to a place where backups serve as a gateway to prevent vendor lock-in, right? What do I mean by that? Having an exit strategy for you to basically recover to any platform from point A to point B. For instance, we do notice a lot of VMware customers moving on to other hypervisors such as Nutanix or uh, Azure Local or Hyper-V, and we are basically able to help those customers to move their workloads onto their respective hypervisors or even hyperscalers for that matter, right? And the one thing I'm starting to realize, I'm not just me, the customers are starting to realize that backups are not just to, just an insurance to protect your data, but also, an option or a key for you to unlock yourself from vendor lock-ins, right? And that is a key aspect that we all, as a community, as an audience, start to look into that direction. And if you start paying attention into cross hypervisor or cross platform restores, when you start asking those questions, that's when we as a community or from a software standpoint will be able to develop solutions that are truly versatile across all of the platform. HYCU has started this, and I'm sure other vendors are doing this too, but we were at the forefront of doing the cross hypervisor and cross hyperscaler restores. And I'm really looking forward to basically having this capability move forward in a more seamless fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that from you, Shiva. That a backup and or data protection isn't just insurance policy. It's now an enabler, right? It's now an
Exactly.
enabler to execute on strategy that wasn't really possible 5, 10 years ago. I love that from you. Thank you very much. Right, so I just want to cover in a bit more detail our spin up to cloud, right? So that's so spin up is the feature inside of HYCU that allows you to do automated disaster recovery into public cloud. We have covered this a lot already, so I won't go over it in too much detail, but just to kind of give people a real kind of clear view of what spin up enables customers to do. So failover, failback, and migration to, from, and between the public cloud, right? So the workflows are built into the product. They're not bolt-ons, they're not scripting, they're not APIs you have to tap into and get a software engineering team to suddenly write something for you, right? The workflows are built in there, enabling you to easily, as I said, with one drop-down box, spin up a VM into public cloud, and then protect it while it's there, and then repatriate it back down when you need to. All of that from HYCU. I mentioned this many times, but I'm going to cover this again. No compute costs. There's no expensive compute costs sat around just waiting to be used, right? This is a real not a bugbear, but when we're looking at TCO and efficiency, even like our green status around, among organizations, having compute sat there idle, running, just doing conversions and doing checks or those types of things, waiting to be used, and typically probably not being used more than once a year, maybe once every 3 years, maybe even never, right? It feels like a waste of opportunity and a waste of resources just sat there burning through our burning through our budget for the year for essentially nothing, right? So look out for that. And then support for all major public clouds. We support flexibility and freedom across all three of the major public cloud providers. And we do it equally for all three, right? We don't have a preferred, oh, we're better with AWS, but we work across all three. We're pretty agnostic. We work across all three equally well. And again, the biggest one for me here is customer maintaining control. There is no customer owned tenant. Sorry, it always lands into customer tenancy. There is no HYCU cloud. There is no HYCU DRaaS, HYCU Vault, whatever you want to brand it as. There is no way of running or storing data inside of a HYCU environment. It always lands and it's been stored and processed in a customer environment. And that's incredibly important for sovereignty and control. And that's just true for disaster recovery as well. And if we took my very rudimentary architecture, and I could say architecture because the true techies will say that's not architecture, it's marketecture, but yeah, we'll call it that. So essentially, we have our production site left-hand side here. Are we going to take our backups? The key thing, again, from HYCU is flexibility and control. Customer gets to decide where you keep your backups, whether that's AWS, Azure, GCP, data domain, Cyber Vault, whatever it may be, you get to choose where you keep your backups. And then from there, we can just do a cloud recovery. So it really is that simple. I know I've made it, this is a super simplified diagram. There's a lot of stuff in the background that happens that not even I see right when I'm using the product, but that's essentially what we're trying to enable people to do is unlock strategies like this without all the technical expertise, all the conversion, all of that really hard stuff we've hidden behind the scenes, right? You're like a swan on a lake, right? All the all the hard stuff's happening under the water and just looks seamless and gliding across the water on top. That's essentially what we're trying to do at HYCU is hide all that complexity, hide all that. What about this? What about data conversion? What about this? What about that? All those questions that come up from your technical teams to say, well, how do we do it? Well, HYCU handles all of that for us, and we just enable you to recover. And then when we're finished, we just come back again, directly back into Nutanix or wherever else you want to go, back into your VMware environment or your Azure local, whatever it might be. And then you just repeat again, right? You back up, utilize the backup targets you want to use, and then away you go again. So it's incredibly easy, incredibly simple. So we have the spin up to cloud, and then when you want to come back again, spin up from cloud. And that's even also if you know, a lot of customers will go, oh, it's only going to be a week of outage. We'll utilize the cloud for a week, right? And then a week turns into 2 weeks turn into 3 weeks, a month turns into 3 months, right? But in that time, production can't stop, right? So we have to either expand those VMs, add more VMs, such things. So even if you add more VMs, you can spin born in Azure or born in AWS, born in GCP VMs or instances, and we can convert those back down again. So it's not just the ones that we've spun up into the cloud, also ones that are born in the cloud, we can bring back down to on-premises as well, or across cloud as well. So it gives you that flexibility that, even if you are in the cloud and you're running there for an extended period of time because you have to, maybe data center caught fire and it's going to take time. Or actually, I've even seen cyber attacks, right, take out whole data centers or whole racks in data centers. And then, FBI or CIA or, anyone else around the world, your agency for counter cyber criminals, them taking control of those racks and that hardware to say we need to look into this because it could be like state sponsored or it could be something they've not seen before or something they want to take a deeper look. So suddenly you're without your hardware and your stuff for maybe 2-3 months. There's no point in ordering brand new stuff, right? Because that's going to take 2, 3 months to get here. So run in the cloud for longer, right? So it's all those different things start to come into play. It's not just about the things that may or may not happen. These things do happen. I've seen it in real life. These things happen, and it's about planning for them as well. So 3 key takeaways, and then we're going to do questions, Shiva. So the 3 key takeaways that I have is understand if you require a dedicated tool or if you could consolidate down into a single solution of HYCU. I think this really comes down to what Shiva mentioned earlier with around the RPOs and RTOs, classifying business data in, from tier 1 to tier 4, wherever, however you do it in your organization, are really understanding what tool is going to be utilized for tier 1 if a different tool is needed or required, or actually could HYCU do tier 1 all the way through to tier 4? It is possible. We have organizations that have that already, right? They utilize HYCU for all of their backup and disaster recovery solutions because it is it's good enough and does a very, very good job of unlocking that flexibility, and it's completely has the lowest TCO in the marketplace pretty much. Moves me on to the next point. Ensure your current solution is cost effective, not burning through expensive resources. So expensive resources are obviously things like cloud compute, but also expensive resources are people. If you've got dedicated DR teams, or if you've got dedicated people inside your data protection team just monitoring that data protection or that disaster recovery tool, imagine if we consolidate it down. Everyone's become experts on HYCU, and we can flip those people into becoming, okay, how do we look at data protection for the next thing? How do we look at cyber resilience, or how do we up our game in X area, right? These people can then start strategizing on more strategic things rather than just keeping the lights on and making sure DR is working properly. And the last piece for me is strive for freedom, flexibility, and control. Those 3 things should not be optional in your tooling. You should have freedom of choice of where you choose, complete flexibility, so you're not tied in, and you can go, I'm going to do GCP this month, I'm going to do AWS next month, I'm going to do Azure the month after, and then the month after I'm going to spin to NC2. You should be able to make those decisions if you want to without your tool holding you back. And the last piece being control, making sure you always maintain control and sovereignty of your own data. Is there anything you want to add before we kind of take questions, Shiva?
Yeah, I think we covered pretty much everything we have. So yeah, I'm totally fine.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So last piece is, if you want to take a demo with one of our experts, feel free to scan the QR code. I'll leave this on the screen for just a minute. But I also want to talk to you about another tool we have, which is called rGraph. So we mentioned earlier around the SaaS piece. So obviously we're talking about Nutanix today, but we know we live in a world where Nutanix is only going to be a small a part or a part of a data strategy. It's not going to be 100% of everything. Most people have got Office 365, Salesforce, the Atlassian suite, Okta, Entra. All these SaaS applications make up key components of their business and their IT strategies. But most organizations don't understand what they're using and how they can protect it. So here's where we introduce rGraph. So the industry first SaaS data visualization tool. So essentially you hook it into your estate in read-only access, obviously, because you don't want to cause any issues. And essentially we can then visualize all the SaaS applications you're using in your organization, and then show you the protection status of those. What is protected, what can be protected, what the vendor natively does, which for the vast majority of SaaS applications is 0, and then show you how you can improve on that as well. So if you'd like to see the product tour of rGraph, again, scan the QR code on the screen right now, and that'll bring you to our rGraph page. So organizations have really benefited from. It's completely free to use for customers and for prospects and partners, etc. So it's a really good kind of exploration exercise just to see what's going on in your organization. Really good for auditors, really good for compliance, really good for going out to business and budget holders and saying, hey guys, have you seen this report? Like, this is all of the SaaS data that we have, and we're only currently protecting 1 or 2% of what we have. This is something we need to investigate in the future or look at. So yeah, scan the QR code on screen to get to our product tour of that as well. So let's dive into some questions. Right. So we've had, what does TCO mean? Sorry if I didn't explain TCO. So TCO is total cost of ownership. So that kind of incorporates, the purchasing of the software, the cost to install, maintain, monitor, manage, any ongoing costs for people to run it. So kind of incorporating not just the software costs or not just the hardware for alternative solutions, but understanding the whole total cost of ownership over a period of time for that solution. And then someone else has asked, what does RTO and RPO mean? And I think Shiva, you did actually cover this in quite some
It's the
details there.
recovery time objective and recovery point objective.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So
RPO basically stands for the recovery point objective, how often your data needs to be protected, and basically talks about the question that you need to ask yourself is, when I'm recovering my secondary site, how much data can I afford to lose? Is it 1 hour worth of data? Is it 24 hours worth of data, right? So that's RPO. RTO, on the other hand, stands for recovery time objective, which basically talks about how quickly can I bring my service up and running if it goes down on my primary site. So that's what RPO and RTO means.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the clarification, Shiva.
Yeah.
Then one more question is how easy is failback? Usually with these solutions, the MAC address and configuration changes become difficult, especially machines that need MAC address for authentication. Sorry for the technical questions. How do we resolve that? So as I mentioned, when we're bringing things back down again, we recognize that it came from, let's say, Nutanix already, and we give you the ability to put it back as it was. So you can put it back with the same MAC address if you needed to. So we understand that is a challenge, and our engineers have addressed how we can do that. So hopefully you'll see if you schedule a demo with our team, right? I mean, I'll put that back onto the screen so people can schedule a demo if they want to. Schedule a demo with one of our technical team, and they'll be able to run you through all those kind of unique circumstances where we've thought about these challenges that customers have and gone, here's how we solve it, right? Me and Shiva hopefully done a great job explaining everything, but there's always going to be nuances and small things that are going to be applicable to some customers and not, that we haven't either mentioned or even managed to explain that well. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with your technical team, your customer success managers, your engineers, whoever it may be that you contact at HYCU, your partners, we can obviously answer all those questions you may have. And the last question is, can you send me a recording? Yes, we will be sending recordings out as soon as we've done all the bits we need to do behind the scenes. Not my remit, but yeah, yes, all of our webinars get sent out to everyone who's registered automatically. So you'll be receiving a recording of the webinar. And if you don't receive it or it goes into junk or you can't find it, it will be available on HYCU.com as well later on. So you'll be able to get it on demand if you do manage to lose that link or lose the email for whatever reason. I think that's all the questions we have, Shiva. So thank you very much for joining me, and thanks everyone for joining online today. Hope it's been of value to you, and hopefully everyone's registered for the next in the series. We'll have even more insights from the team at HYCU on how you can kind of better your HYCU experience, if you will. So Shiva, thank you very much again, and we'll see you on the next one, everybody.
Thank you.